Class War. Foreclosures at an all-time high. Brought to you by Kenneth Chabert at yourlegallegup.com. Your advantage if you're being sued by debt collectors. There is a class war going on. I think Thomas Jefferson put it best when he was warning the founders of our country not to create a central bank, which Jefferson was convinced would result in widespread poverty. Here's what Jefferson said. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of their currency, first by inflation, then by deflation, the banks will deprive the people of all their property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. After a lot of argument, the other founders agreed with Jefferson and decided against a central bank. Unfortunately, the lesson was forgotten by 1913, and that's when we got the Fed, the Federal Reserve. Class war is a term that is much abused these days, in my opinion. It seems to have more political party meanings than anything else, as it is currently used. It's become popular to refer to efforts to tax the rich as class war. Sure, maybe. I have my doubts about current efforts to tax the rich for what it's worth, but this video is not about that. This video is about something much, much bigger. If you are watching it, it may be because you are, or are struggling to keep from becoming, a casualty of the class war. This video seeks to put your struggles into a larger context and to encourage you to stand up for yourself. Don't expect significant help from the politicians, any of them. The class war extends way beyond the political parties. The political parties are generally against you. Over the past 10 years, we've had two presidents, one supposedly conservative and one supposedly liberal. And the gap between the haves and the have-nots has steadily widened the whole time under both administrations. You see, Jefferson's fear has become reality. The banks do control the currency, and they are in the process of taking everything away from everybody else. A few years ago, I pointed out that people were behind in their mortgages and vulnerable to foreclosure, but that banks were not foreclosing very rapidly. That was because of accounting procedures and regulations that require banks to maintain a certain amount of money or assets in reserve. And secondly, the regulations control when assets which lose value have to be recorded as losses, thus requiring the banks to increase their cash reserves or be declared bankrupt. You see, the last recession was ended by one stroke of the pen. And that was a signature that allowed banks to switch from having to count their losing assets at their current, much reduced market value, to counting them as being worth what the banks had paid for them, their historic value, which, as everyone knows, the banks had allowed to be grossly overstated. The FBI said it was rampant crime. Under the old rules, the bank had reasons to foreclose immediately so as to minimize their ultimate losses when they were faced with losses. Under the new rules, on the other hand, banks had incentives never to foreclose so that they could keep showing the mortgages at their historic value and not have to show a loss. More importantly, the new mark-to-fantasy rule shielded the banks from the consequences of their own criminal actions in overstating the value of the houses they financed. And the new rule guaranteed that no one could know which banks were financially solid and which ones were zombies. But I also pointed out that the new regulations would slow down foreclosures and other debt liquidations. Because selling a house at auction, or writing off a credit card debt, would be a new event, which would require the bank to recognize its loss, even under the new law. Banks with a lot of bad debt could not foreclose without showing that they themselves were insolvent. That means bankrupt. And when I was a kid, we called that sort of situation a Mexican standoff. Nobody could pull the trigger without being hurt himself. It worked like that for a while, and a lot of people lived in their houses long after not being able to afford the payments. And a lot of people had large amounts of unpaid credit card debt that sat in limbo. Are these people bad for continuing to live in their houses after they stop paying for them? Not in my opinion. Remember Jefferson's words? First by inflation, then by deflation, the banks will deprive the people of all their property until their children wake up homeless. That's what the dot-com bubble and the real estate bubbles were all about. Those were the inflations. And since then we've been in the deflations that were designed to deprive the people of all their property. It's happening more and faster now because all the bailouts have taken yet more money away from the people, making it even harder for them to afford their payments, and put it into the hands of the banks. Again, protecting the banks from the consequences of their illegal and immoral actions, and also freeing the banks to recognize their paper losses on the bad mortgages and get down to the business of kicking people out of their homes. They've got enough money on the balance sheet now so that they can recognize the bad debts. That's the main thing the bailouts did. It made the banks rich enough to foreclose on everybody. Defending yourself from the debt collectors is not just trying to protect what's yours. It's a real stand for freedom in our country. Protect what's yours and don't let the debt collectors rip you off. My site and materials can help. Go to yourlegallegup.com. Get my litigation manual and forums, or get the videos and defend yourself. You'll be glad that you did. You may not consider this video or anything I say in this or any video as legal advice. I cannot give you legal advice, but as a former lawyer, I do know the legal process and debt law very well. So use what I say as a source of information and apply your own judgment to your case. To get more help on fighting debt collectors and their lawsuits, go to yourlegallegup.com. Get my litigation manual and forums. If you appreciate this video, please take a second and like it, subscribe, and friend me, as these things will help others find my videos and begin to learn more about the debt litigation process. Defend yourself from the debt collectors on Facebook or YouTube, as these things help others find my videos and begin to learn more about the debt litigation process. Defend yourself from the debt collectors.